Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi ji, the President of the Council of Ministers of Italy, Her Excellency Giorgia Meloni, Foreign Minister of India, Dr. Jaishankar, Ambassador Vinay Quatra, esteemed leaders, excellencies and distinguished guests, a very, very warm welcome to the 8th Raisina Dialogue. This edition of the dialogue is special. It is the first dialogue in India's Amrit Kal, or Golden Age, an epoch marking the 25 years leading up to a century of India's independence. When colonial rule left our country starving of resources, it could not shackle the hopes and dreams of a billion people. Today, those aspirations remain alive, and 75 years that passed have led to this very moment of resurgence. Amrit Kal is when the population of this country will be lifted to new standards of living, when the state will grow it in its capacity to serve the needs of not just its own citizens, but those of the world, and when the country will invest in shaping a new global order that is responsive to all humanity and to our shared planet. The Raisina Dialogue seeks to be an ideas companion in this journey of India with the world. There is a packed agenda for the dialogue in the days ahead that allows us to engage with new voices, new thoughts and new ideas that could indeed change our paradigms. 2023 is also significant for India as it is the year of India's presidency of the G20, a group of nations that are pivotal to the world's future because their choices have cascading regional and global consequences. The failures of the G20 will hurt the world, and their successes will lift us all. The ambition of this year's G20 has also shaped the dialogue's agenda. From debating the need for reforms in multilateralism to encouraging lifestyle changes to mitigate the climate crisis, the Raisina Dialogue aims to support India's G20 priorities. This year, G20 also aims to be inclusive. The Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi, elaborated his vision at the Voice of the Global South Summit. He said, and I quote, "As far as India is concerned, your voice is India's voice, your priorities are India's priorities." This sentiment will be reflected in the Raisina Dialogue Town Hall on March 5th, where we will gather not only the G20 countries, but also participants from over 80 countries to be present and to discuss our common future. That collective future may be difficult to imagine at this moment, given what we went through in the first 2 years of this decade. Indeed, has it only been 2 years? From old conflicts resurfacing in Europe to convenient morality in Afghanistan, from complete disregard for the environment to selfish acts during the COVID-19 pandemic. This already feels like a very long decade, and this brought out the worst of humanity. Forums like this dialogue are seeking to bring out the best. It is during these gatherings that exaltations could catalyze an inclusive development policy that is fit for purpose. The theme for this year's dialogue is provocation, uncertainty, turbulence, lighthouse in the tempest. Question mark. Can all of us assembled here in New Delhi be a lighthouse in our own way? As the world is being battered by a perfect storm, multiple beacons are needed to illuminate the way. India seeks to be one of them and to inspire others to be the same. Last year, as we opened the dialogue, we made 2 promises to the Honorable Prime Minister. First, that as hosts, we would follow the sun to where the best and most plausible ideas await. And second, we committed to investing in building the next generation of global diplomats. This year, on February 18th, we launched Raisina at Sydney, alongside the editions we host in Delhi, Berlin, and Washington, D.C. This dialogue is now truly chasing the sun, seeking inspiration from across the globe. This October, the past October, we also inaugurated the Raisina Forum for the Future of Diplomacy. Hosted in New Delhi and Varanasi, it brought together diplomats from over 30 countries to rethink their official responsibilities and ethics. The world's diplomatic corps are now the first responders to everything, from health crisis to man-made and natural disasters. The investment in skills and character that may be demanded of them need to be invested in and need to be invested in now. Continuing our tradition of engaging the brightest minds from around the world, We welcome the 2023 batch of the Raisina Young Fellows who are seated here to my right. We have 48 fellows from 33 countries and a community which is now close to 2,000 from over 110 countries. It is a hope that these young minds and others who will join us at the dialogue will take with them new perspectives, new friendships, and a new resolve, inspired by the ethos of this G20 priority and agenda. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, one earth, one family, one future. Stronger together is the Indian way. Perhaps that is the only way. Welcome once again, and let the conversations begin. I thank you for gathering here, and I want to now invite the chairman of the Observer Research Foundation, Mr. Sunjoy Joshi, to introduce the dialogue and our keynote address and inaugural speaker. Mr. Sunjoy Joshi, the mic is yours.
A very good evening to all our distinguished guests. Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi ji, our guest of honor, Excellency Giorgia Meloni, Prime Minister of Italy, Honorable External Affairs Minister, our partners, the Ministry of External Affairs, Ministers, Admirals, Generals, this distinguished gathering assembled in this room for the 8th Raisina Dialogue. 2 decades ago, the phrase Vision 2020 used to evoke hope and optimism over the future of a 21st century world, riding on the back of global value chains, free markets, into a world of universal prosperity. Well, 2020 came, and instead of a well-lit road going to the future, we seem to have hit a series of blind spots one after the other. And today, the engine of globalization, which is supposed to be the engine of growth, lies broken, rudderless. And as we assemble for the 8th edition of Raisina Dialogue, we are challenged responding to a world where multilateralism lies fatally wounded. Wounded in wars that spill into multiple domains that no Geneva Convention controls. Trade, global finance, energy, food, everything is a weapon. A hyper-connected world, hyperventilating on Twitter 24/7, where the pandemic of hate and anger spreads with greater virulence than COVID-19 ever did. Now, what rules of engagement do we now create for countries and people that seem to have no desire to talk to each other? Well, some argue that the answer lies in building gated communities of nations that grant membership based on the reliability of the cardholders. Minilateralism, we called it. Well, others think that the answer lies in running the world's financial affairs out of a global capital located perhaps in the Swiss resort town of Davos. Both are fatally flawed. The problems that confront us cannot be confined within these walled gates. There's a real world out there which will keep invading, shattering the carefully constructed narratives, the norms, the sanctions that prop up these virtual domains. And caught in between all this are nations, middle powers, beleaguered emerging economies that, given a choice, have no interest in engaging in geopolitical competition, much less playing ball with revisionist powers keen to overturn the existing global order. These nations bank upon global multilateral institutions to manage potential conflicts and smooth the impact of trade wars and great power rivalries. And yet, as the business of governance has got more complex, more complicated, more than ever, we need new rules for the road now. We need new rules of the road now because we no longer travel just as a community of nations. We have been joined by many new actors who can traverse these highways with far greater speed than the nations ever do. And these are tectonic events which are taking place, and the greater their magnitude, the weaker is becoming our capacity to respond to it. And mind you, this is only Act 1 of this play. Already we see technology move in to substitute agency-led order and norms by discrete, anonymized protocols for finance, trade, commerce, and communications. For good or for bad, it is difficult to tell today. But in Act 2, which is coming, which is called the Age of the Intelligent Machine, now, unlike science fiction, the machine age does not manifest itself suddenly as an omnipresent, all-knowing chatbot appearing one fine day. Instead, it is slipping in each day, camouflaged in a forest of cookies, protocols, self-learning algorithms, Kafkaesque structures, which fashioned by tech entrepreneurs, advertisers, agents, ordering and controlling the lives of the governing and the governed both. The question is how democratic or how intrusive these are going to be, and that is a question which is going to keep on haunting us. And we can be sure that in the days ahead, the negotiations and the confrontations to settle these structures are going to be very intense. So the Raisina Dialogue 2023, today we are holding it as India takes charge of the G20, and a year that promises to be more than the ordinary. This forum comes at a time when many of us in Delhi believe that we have the ability to incubate conversations where many of these posers must be responded to. Our hope is that the Raisina Dialogue becomes one of the most influential of these platforms during India's presidency, a forum where each one of us in these troubled, tempestuous times contributes to the quest for answers and becomes part of the lighthouse that guides the ship back safely to shore. Thank you. And with that, I would like to invite Her Excellency Giorgia Meloni to deliver a keynote address. Over to you, ma'am.
Dear Prime Minister Modi, Excellencies, distinguished guests, Namaskar. It is an honor for me to inaugurate this year's Raisina Dialogue and to do so in front of such an extraordinary audience, an audience that includes representatives from across the G20, with whom Italy shares a special responsibility to find solutions to our common global challenges. With this in mind, well, I would like to take this opportunity to share my appreciation for Prime Minister Modi's hard work on handling a complex presidency and to reiterate Italy's full support to its success. I am told that the name of this international conference comes from Raisina Hill here in Delhi, from which the government is granted a broader view of India's capital city. In troubled times like today, this is, I think, a fitting metaphor of the vision that we as leaders, thinkers, civil servants need to adopt. It reminds me of the Palatino, the Campidoglio, and the other hills on which our ancestors founded ancient Rome more than 2,000 years ago, from which an extensive network of roads connected different provinces, leading from the center of the Italian peninsula to very diverse cultures. And I think that it is also the way we need of doing politics today. When I was running for the electoral campaign, I said that I didn't want to climb the institutions to gain power. I wanted to climb the institution, for it is the only way that you can have a better view of what is happening and give best solutions. And that is exactly what I see today. As we look at events around us, our identity shapes our field of vision, both as individuals and as nations. Identity is shaped deeply by geography, and at the same time, our thoughts could be shaped by provocation. Here I would like to try to interpret in a positive way the very interesting question posed by the organizers of this conference. And I will start from the word provocation, which could certainly be considered as an affront to our sensitivities, but also as a spur to think in a different way. A challenge to accept the challenges of uncertainty and turbulence. For nothing is more certain than the uncertainty of our historic times. This is definitely the era of uncertainty, and at the same time, a period of unprecedented turbulence. We are in a tempest, and we need to stand tall in considering our common challenges. We need to stand on the hill to take a deep breath and see our lands and seas and their problems in a more enlightened way. We need a lighthouse in the storm. That is why opportunities like the Raisina Dialogue are so precious in times of accelerated and confusing events, which risk to be governed only with superficial thoughts and hasty actions. Therefore, let's go back to the fundamental factors, including the geographical one of our identities, and considering some important similarities between the wide and profound wealth of the Indian and Italian ancient cultures and contemporary interests. I wonder if one can speak of the concept of peninsularity, which could have a place next to those of insularity and continentality. Italy is deeply European. Our roots and history, they are European. And together with the nation across the continent, we've built Europe's identity through the centuries. Yet all of Italy's long coastlines are bathed in the Mediterranean, the natural environment where the Judaic, Christian, and classic roots of Europe have developed. Geography has shaped our culture, our outward projection, and our growth as civilization. And much like India, the peninsular factor has given us a crucial resource, being both a continental and a maritime nation. A key advantage, making us natural platforms for trade, logistics, and the dissemination of culture and science. For centuries, our maritime flows have looked towards the south and to the rest of the Mediterranean, which remains our natural neighbor, and with whom we are continuing to build mutually beneficial relations. This is the spirit enshrined in our vision, also dubbed the Mattei Plan for the Mediterranean and for all the African continent, with its growing population, challenges, and opportunities. A vast region which has also the resources, starting with energy, which are so crucial for Europe, but which should, first of all, benefit the peoples who are the owners of these commodities. Our objectives are simple: ensuring prosperity, peace, and lasting friendship through collaboration on an equal footing. A collaboration aimed at providing tangible benefits for all, without predatory ambitions, without coercion, economic or otherwise. In those first few months of my tenure, I gave priority to developing equal partnership on common priorities such as energy, and Italy is working to be the bridge connecting the Eastern Mediterranean, Africa, and Europe. Producer countries should benefit from their resources for their own prosperity and stability. Green energy, hydrogen, and electricity will more and more be locally produced for their own citizens and for Europe. Much like the energy transition, the digital transition is also based on connectivity. Data are the energy of our digital societies, and they will flow from India to Europe across the Mediterranean and Italy. The Blue Raman project will link the Indo-Pacific to our European economies. In the past, the Alps at our north protected Italy, but they were also the area of connection to the rest of Europe. Likewise, the Mediterranean Sea was for centuries a sort of blind alley, the extreme appendix of the Atlantic Ocean. Human progress and ingenuity, however, made the impossible possible. A change in geography, a passage from the Mediterranean to the Indo-Pacific through the Suez Canal. Today, the Mediterranean is really the sea in the middle, the basin which stands between the two major maritime spaces of the globe, the Atlantic and the Indo-Pacific. Italy, with its peninsula, which lies in the very center of the Mediterranean Sea, continues to be in every way a fully integrated part of the Euro-Atlantic community and of the cultural and political West. But it is more and more projected towards the Indo-Pacific, regaining the history of our maritime republics and of Marco Polo, especially after the opening of the Suez Canal. The laws of physics, starting with the communicating vessels, are those of trade. The impact of such a shift are hard to exaggerate. 150 years later, as the Indo-Pacific has become a crucial center for gravity for the global economy, 40% of the EU's foreign trade passes through the South China Sea, and much more transits through the Indian Ocean. Our two regions are more interconnected than ever before. Together, we account for 70% of global trade, and the EU has become the biggest investor in the Indo-Pacific, which contributes to two-thirds of global economic growth. The world's oceans connect us. They are essential to global commerce and our way of life. Today, shipping makes up 90% of all international trade, and freedom of navigation is crucial for our economies. Global interconnection has enabled our economies to cooperate and flourish, but it comes at a cost, especially in times of turbulence with the international community. What happens in Europe affects the Indo-Pacific in ways it would not have in the past. And what happens in the Indo-Pacific has direct repercussions in Europe. This is not a surprise. This is not a black swan. It is rather a gray rhino we should have seen. And it is something we need to keep in mind as we move forward. This implies a new approach on how we work together. We need to see the world through progressive lens, to focus with the same level of attention on both long and short-term dynamics. We face a war of aggression which brings us back to the tragedies of the 20th century, but at the same time we need to have the necessary vision to be prepared for the challenges of the 21st century. The COVID-19 pandemic shook the foundation of international trade and mobility, exposed profound weaknesses in the resilience of global supply chains and in globalization as we knew it. They said we could solve every problem with free trade. We were going to have democracy and richness for everybody. It wasn't like that. And we have to face what we were wrong in. As we worked to overcome these challenges, recover from the pandemic's devastating impact, and restore global trade flows, the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine disrupt global energy prices, endangered food security, and sent waves of inflation across the world to the detriment of the most vulnerable, especially in the global south. And it also put at risk global stability, peace, security, which depend on a predictable, rule-based international order. Just 1 year ago, we were poised to face the challenges of the 21st century, which were eradicating poverty, addressing climate change, managing the impacts of digitalization on information flows and on daily life in our societies, handling the advent of new technologies such as quantum computing and artificial intelligence. However, the events of February 24th last year brought us back to the wars of 20th century. I was in Kyiv last week. I witnessed a hard reality on the ground and felt the strength of the Ukrainians' national spirit among the destruction. The war is a war in Europe, distant geographically from many other parts of the world, which in many cases are facing their own hardships closer at hand. This should not, however, overshadow the relevance of what is at stake. The Russian attack is not simply an act of war or a localized conflict. It is an act against the territorial integrity of a sovereign nation in violation of the fundamental principle of the global order that enables the international community to thrive. And we cannot allow the very foundations of international law to be threatened, without which only military force would be taken into account, and every state in the world would risk being invaded by its neighbor. These are not only the interests of the European countries. These are the common goods for the coexistence of all countries of the world. We cannot sit idly in the face of this with this provocation at the heart of the UN Charter, which threatens to undermine stability across the globe. And we cannot allow the law of the strongest to overcome the strength of law. I know that there are many who feel that Europe has in the past failed to acknowledge that the world's problems are also its own. And perhaps until the past few years, our geopolitical stance has been less vocal than it could have been. This is no longer the case. And initiatives such as the EU strategy for the Indo-Pacific demonstrate that our views have indeed broadened. Regional affairs rapidly turn into global affairs in today's interconnected world. And unfortunately, Europe's problem today has become the world's problem. Italy and India share a profound conviction that only the rule of law can allow humanity to prosper and develop in balance and harmony. As forward-looking countries with rich cultures dating back millennia, we have a common human-centric vision in which democracy, science, peace, prosperity go hand in hand. The relationship between artificial intelligence and ethics is crucial. All developments must be human-centered. Our strength lies in our human capital, in our abilities to create and to push the boundaries of science, knowledge, and technology while keeping the state at the service of our citizens. We are building new bridge between academic and research centers of Italy and India. Despite the long history of our respective people, we are both young as states. We have had to overcome intense similar struggles to establish ourselves as independent states. It is no coincidence that the Italian Risorgimento was among the sources of inspiration for many Indians fighting for their independence, and that the work of Giuseppe Mazzini, a key figure for Italy's unification, was translated, read, and studied by many Indian patriots. Gandhi himself, whose Young India drew from Mazzini's Giovane Italia, recognized his influence, saying, "There are few examples in the world of a man who alone accomplished this country's resurrection by the power of his thoughts and extreme dedication throughout the course of his life." Our civilizations have met, touched, and influenced each other along the centuries. There are many examples, but one struck a particular chord with me: the discovery of an Indian ivory statue in the 2,000 years old ruins of Pompeii, a powerful testimony of the depth of our historical relations. Our cultures are hymns to life and love, and we will continue to fight with determination against those who worship hate and violence. Terrorism is a cancer that also needs to be faced through a wide international cooperation, and it must be addressed with leadership and resolve. As I sit in my office in Palazzo Chigi in Rome, which is known as the Prua d'Italia, the bow of Italy, I'm often reminded of my nation's maritime nature. As we navigate the waters of the world, we must navigate the new horizons of the 21st century. We need to see better as we move through uncertainty, to strengthen the resilience of our global relationships through greater cooperation and diversification. It is true that, as the title of this year's Raisina Dialogue reminds us, we are weathering a storm, which is a terrible storm, that is making it difficult for our ships to sail through crosswinds and violent waves crashing on the surf. And fear has crept into their crews, and even the most seasoned sailors are hard-pressed to make the right decisions. Those who are at the stern, carrying the responsibility of their crews and of their ships, they can make the difference. And this is precisely the choice we as leaders have ahead of us, either swaying into turbulent waters or guiding our ships towards the safety of a friendly harbor. Our compass is our common endeavor to protect the shared human values that form the basis of our coexistence. India is a key player in this broad landscape, bathing in the Indo-Pacific much as Italy is at the heart of the Mediterranean. And our two countries have important contributions to make together. This is why Prime Minister Modi and I have just announced the scaling up of our bilateral relations to a strategic partnership. Building on bilateral tools and broader programs such as the EU Global Gateway, Europe and the Indo-Pacific, but also Latin America and the African continent are enhancing their collaboration on all fronts, from connectivity to infrastructure and fair and sustainable trade, while keeping in mind the strategic priority for all of us, which is the energy transition. And this will be a key element in the global fight against climate change, to which we all need to contribute with different tasks and responsibilities. We have to do it bearing in mind our responsibilities towards the future generation, but also to our citizens today, and we need to do it in a balanced way. Each country has to do its part. Failing to do so, it would have a profound impact on humanity worldwide, directly through food shortage, drought, extreme weather events and other disasters, but also indirectly through new conflicts arising from climate-induced migrations and transboundary disputes over scarce resources. The need to accelerate the energy transition has been compounded by the energy crisis, which has highlighted the vulnerability of economies across the world. It has, however, also shown that global coordination on climate change is not a zero-sum game, but a true shared interest. The same is true for technological development and dissemination, where Indian countries throughout the Indo-Pacific have a central role to play, given their highly skilled workforce, their resources, and their strategic position along the global value chains. Our ability to work together on renewable energy, green hydrogen, circularity, and the twin transition will determine our success. And it requires a functioning international order. And this is something that we, humans of the 21st century, cannot do without, and that we need to nurture and reaffirm at every turn. The governance of multilateral organization must be updated, but the cornerstones of multilateralism cannot be put in question, as they are also the cornerstones of peace and freedom. Let us not feed the false metaphor of a world divided, the West against the rest. The unshakable unity in the face of the growing threat to international peace and stability goes well beyond the Western interest. It is a common interest. And this is, I believe, a key message that could emerge from the Indian G20 presidency, as well as from the Raisina Dialogue. A message of hope, a message of unity. Every nation can be a lighthouse. With the wealth and pride of its tradition and identity, which somebody would like to forget or hide or kick. But we are nothing without our roots, our rights, and the capability we have to recognize them. They depend from our tradition. And who wants to kick our tradition, our identity, wants to kick our rights. So it's an important struggle that we are facing all over the world. And I know that on this, we do agree the same point of view. Lighthouses do not obscure each other, but they can shine together and help all of us to navigate in these troubled waters. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that inspirational speech. May I now request the Indian External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, to propose a vote of thanks.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, my distinguished foreign ministerial colleagues, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I think you have heard both from the keynote speaker and the two speakers before her about the state of the world. And that state of the world is captured obviously by the theme of this conference. But it's up to each one of us to see whether we put the focus on the tempest or the lighthouse. I think a lot of us, certainly in India, we can see the lighthouse shine quite brightly. We believe that for all the challenges in the world, there is the leadership, there is a vision, there are solutions, and much of that today forms the agenda of the G20. So it's my honor today to propose a vote of thanks. I particularly thank Prime Minister Meloni for joining us this evening. I thank the Prime Minister, Narendra Modi ji, for keeping his word year after year of being here. And to all of you, I wish you a very, very productive conference over the next few days. Thank you very much.